I'm sitting at my desk, the sunlight spilling across the polished mahogany like it's trying to warm me up, but it doesn't quite reach the knot in my chest. My silk blouse brushes against my skin with each small movement, soft and comforting, yet I feel the tension coiling tighter with every buzz of my phone. I've built a life that looks effortless from the outside, an office that smells faintly of fresh coffee and leather-bound books, awards glinting on the shelves, but no one here knows the small, quiet battles I fought to get here. Then it happens. A message pops up, a name I haven't heard in years flashing on the screen. My heart stutters.
Mom.
The words she sends are innocent enough on the surface. A note about the alumni reunion, a gentle nudge about my college achievements. But I feel the familiar sting, the memory of that day when she ignored me, walked past my graduation ceremony as if I were invisible. The hurt never fully healed. It transformed into something else, something sharper, like polished steel hidden beneath velvet. I press my fingertips against the screen, reading and rereading her words. A quiet, ironic laugh escapes me. How little she knows. How little anyone really knows. The city hums outside my window. The sound should soothe me, but all it does is pull me back to the moment I swore I would never be overlooked again. I remember that day like it was carved into my bones. Graduation morning, my cap heavy with expectation, my gown slightly itchy against my skin, the tassel brushing my cheek with every nervous turn of my head. I stood at the edge of the crowded auditorium, scanning the sea of proud faces, hoping for a familiar smile, a word of encouragement. But none came. Mom was there, yes, in a corner with Dad beside her, but they didn't look at me. They laughed quietly among themselves, exchanging whispered judgments about my choices and plans that wouldn't last. The ceremony moved forward, and every name called felt like a tiny echo bouncing off walls that didn't care about me. When my own name was finally announced, I walked across the stage to the sound of polite claps, my own pulse deafening in my ears. Afterward, as photographers clicked and families embraced, I stood alone in the hallway, a lump forming in my throat. My hands shook so violently, I nearly dropped my diploma. The sting of being dismissed, of being invisible in the one moment I had dreamed of my entire life, seared into me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake them awake, but I swallowed it down because no one had ever taught me how to demand recognition from those who didn't think I deserved it.
It was Grandma Lillian who saved me that day.
She placed her wrinkled hands over mine, warm and reassuring. "Darling," she said softly, "they may not see your worth now, but the world will. And when it does, it will have to respect you, because you will not let anyone ignore you again." She handed me a small leather-bound journal, its edges worn and soft. "Write everything," she whispered. "Your dreams, your plans, your victories.
Keep it close.
One day, they'll understand, but only if you let them see you rise on your own terms." With that, I made a decision. I tucked the journal under my arm, squared my shoulders, and walked out of the auditorium not as the girl they ignored, but as the woman who would one day make them notice. The first step was terrifying, yet exhilarating. I had no idea where it would lead, but I knew I would never allow anyone to define me again. I left that auditorium with nothing but a journal clutched to my chest and a quiet, stubborn determination that no one could ever take away. The first few months were a blur of part-time jobs, late-night study sessions, and endless rejection letters. I learned to survive on the fringe, to build skills quietly, almost invisibly. My apartment was small, the kind of place where the peeling paint and the hum of the radiator reminded you that nothing worth having ever came easy. It was during one of those endless nights, hunched over my laptop with a mug of lukewarm coffee, that I met Claire. She was older, seasoned in the world I wanted to enter, marketing, branding, storytelling, but she saw something in me that I hadn't even recognized in myself yet. "You have instinct," she said, leaning back in her chair, eyes sharp but encouraging. "Most people settle for safety. You're not going to. That's rare. Guard it, cultivate it, and don't show it to anyone who doubts you." Claire became my mentor, my silent champion. She pushed me to tackle projects I thought were beyond me, to pitch ideas that made my stomach knot with fear, and to keep moving forward even when the world seemed to dismiss me at every turn. I worked nights, weekends, holidays. Anytime I could steal a moment to learn, to create, to prove to myself that I could do this. There were small victories at first, landing a modest client who believed in my ideas, seeing my work published on a small but respected platform, hearing someone say my name with respect for the first time. Each win was a brick in the wall I was quietly building around my independence. I didn't post pictures. I didn't announce my milestones on social media. I wanted them to discover the truth later, not live in it now. By the time I turned 27, I had my own consulting firm. The office wasn't flashy at first, just a rented space with one big window, a second-hand desk, and the faint smell of new carpet. But it was mine. Every decision I made, every client I took on, every project I completed was a testament to a truth no one else had acknowledged back at that graduation ceremony. I was capable, I was brilliant, and I was unstoppable. The journal Grandma Lillian had given me became my map, my anchor. Each entry reminded me where I had come from, what I had endured, and why I refused to let my past dictate the limits of my future. I kept her words close, repeating them silently in moments of doubt. They may not see your worth now, but the world will. I smiled at myself one evening, alone in the office, the skyline glowing beyond the glass. I was no longer the girl they ignored. I was the woman who had quietly built an empire in plain sight, who had taken every insult, every dismissal, every slight, and turned it into fuel. And one day I knew the world, and the people who had doubted me, would finally have to take notice. The invitation arrived in a crisp envelope, embossed with a college's seal. My heart skipped, not with excitement, but with a quiet thrill. They wanted me at the alumni reunion, the same people who had ignored my graduation. I stared at the invitation for a long moment, tracing the edges with my fingers. This was my stage now, and I was ready to step into it on my own terms. When I arrived, the familiar campus smelled faintly of freshly cut grass and autumn leaves, a scent that should have felt comforting but instead ignited memories of that humiliating day. I walked through the gates, my heels clicking against the brick pathways, a soft rhythm that felt like a heartbeat of determination. Students and alumni mingled, but my eyes were on the crowd I remembered, the ones who had overlooked me. I found them near the old oak tree, laughing as if the years had erased the sting of my absence. Mom, Dad, even some of the professors who had barely glanced my way at graduation. Their expressions froze when they saw me, a momentary flicker of recognition that quickly gave way to confusion. My tailored suit hugged my figure just right, my hair perfectly set, and my smile calm, measured, almost disarming. I let them take it all in before speaking, letting the silence stretch, heavy and deliberate. The air seemed charged, thick with their curiosity, their unspoken questions. I guided them to the small lounge the college had reserved for VIP alumni, a space filled with original art, awards, and plaques from past donors. They glanced around, bewildered, but still hadn't yet realized what they were looking at. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm, carrying a quiet authority. You wanted to see me? Here I am. I paused, letting my words sink in. I own the consulting firm you've probably heard about. Our revenue last year surpassed 10 million. And yes, I fund scholarships for students who are passionate, dedicated, and often overlooked just like I was. The shock on their faces was unmistakable. Mom's hand flew to her mouth, eyes wide. Dad's brow furrowed as if he were trying to reconcile the image in front of him with the girl they had ignored years ago. One of my old professors stammered. I had no idea. I smiled softly, a mixture of satisfaction and compassion. You didn't because I didn't let you see. I didn't owe you the proof of my worth. But now, perhaps, you can understand that ignoring me didn't make me small. It made me unstoppable. Then I leaned closer, my tone gentle but firm. And for the record, the hall you're about to enter, the one named after me, is more than just a name on a plaque. It represents resilience, hard work, and the refusal to let anyone else define your value. I didn't build this life to show you up. I built it to honor the promise I made to myself that day when no one else would. Their silence was deafening. I let it linger, watching as realization slowly dawned. Some hung their heads in shame, others looked awestruck, and a few were simply speechless, unable to process the woman standing before them. I walked past them toward the hall, the engraved name gleaming in the late afternoon light. Each step echoed like a drumbeat, a reminder of the journey I had taken, the battles I had fought in silence, and the victory I had claimed. They had expected a timid, uncertain girl. Instead, they were met with a woman who had taken every slight, every dismissal, and turned it into a monument, not just of success, but of undeniable worth. Standing in front of them, I felt a quiet power settle over me. For years, I had carried the weight of their doubts, their dismissals, their indifference. Now the scales had shifted. I could have let this moment be purely about proving myself, but that wasn't the woman I had become. I wanted transformation, not just vindication. I looked at Mom first. Her eyes were still rimmed with unshed tears, a mixture of guilt and awe. "I want you to understand," I said softly, "that respect is earned through action, not birthright. If you want a place in my life, you'll need to see my achievements not as competition, but as inspiration. Start by pursuing something that excites you, something you've set aside because you were too focused on controlling me." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "And you?" he asked, almost hesitantly. I met his gaze squarely. "I expect honesty, not just in words but in effort. Show up genuinely for the people you care about. Stop diminishing others to make yourself feel taller." Then I turned to my old professors, some of whom still looked bewildered. "Recognize talent without prejudice. Challenge yourselves to support, rather than dismiss, the students who don't fit the mold you've created. Scholarship, mentorship, encouragement, these aren't favors. They're responsibilities." Each condition was deliberate, connected not to punishment, but to growth. I could see the resistance flicker across their faces, that instinctive defensiveness. I let it be. I had learned long ago that transformation takes time, but it always begins with acknowledgement. "Lastly," I said, raising my hand slightly, "to all of you here, you will need patience. My achievements are mine, built on years of solitude, struggle, and focus. You don't get to step into my story and rewrite it. You can only learn from it." There was a long pause. The room was heavy with the weight of reflection. I didn't raise my voice, didn't plead. My calmness carried more force than any outburst ever could. In that moment, I was both the author and the editor of my life, and no one could erase the chapters one had written with grit and determination. I stepped back, giving them space to absorb the truth. They looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in years. I could see the slow unraveling of old patterns, the stubbornness softening, the pride giving way to curiosity, maybe even humility. I wasn't here to punish, and I wasn't here to dwell in past slights. I was here to show them the possibility of evolution for themselves and for the people they cared about. And as I glanced at the hall bearing my name, I felt a surge of pride. Not just for the recognition, but for the fact that I had the strength, the vision, and the grace to set the terms. This was no longer about proving worth to them. It was about demonstrating what true empowerment looks like: measured, intentional, uncompromising, and full of heart. Weeks passed after that reunion, and slowly, subtly, I began to notice changes. Mom enrolled in a creative writing course she'd always talked about but never pursued. Dad started volunteering at a local community center, mentoring young adults who, like me once, had been overlooked. Even some of my old professors began revising their syllabi, adding mentorship programs, and seeking out students who had quietly been struggling. I watched these changes with a quiet satisfaction, not from a place of revenge, but from knowing that the lessons I had learned through pain were now radiating outward, helping others find their path. It was the same principle Grandma Lillian had instilled in me years ago. Transformation starts within, but its impact ripples beyond yourself. Late one evening, I sat in my office, the city lights flickering through the window. My leather-bound journal rested on the desk beside me, pages worn and filled with the blueprint of my journey, my doubts, my victories, my strategies, my affirmations. I opened it to a page I hadn't read in years. Grandma's words stared back. They may not see your worth now, but the world will. I smiled, feeling the full circle of my story settle within me. I had endured neglect, disbelief, and dismissal. I had built a life from scratch, quietly, meticulously, and I had done it on my terms. More importantly, I had transformed relationships that once felt like chains into connections that felt intentional, respectful, and grown from mutual understanding. Looking at the hall bearing my name on campus, I realized it wasn't just about recognition. It was a monument to resilience, a testament to patience, courage, and self-belief. It symbolized the woman I had become, strong, unapologetic, yet compassionate, independent, yet deeply connected to those who mattered, empowered, yet humble in her victories. I leaned back in my chair, letting the city's hum fill the room, and whispered to myself, softly but with conviction, the truth I had carried through every late night, every rejection, every lonely step of my journey. I was never invisible. I was always becoming, and now, finally, the world and they can see me.